You doing okay? Can you hang on a few more minutes? As Elizabeth Taylor said to one of her 9 husbands, I won't keep you long. Communication experts say there are 4 major elements to effective communication: the right message, the right person, the right way, and the right time. If you mess up any one of them, it can really go bad real fast. A couple were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary and their 63rd birthday each. So they went to the Fiji Islands to join Nicole and her husband. And they're strolling on the beach celebrating their anniversary, kicking their feet in the surf, and a bottle washes up. The wife reaches down, picks up the bottle. There's a cork in it. She pulls the cork out, and a great big genie pops out. The genie said, it's your 40th wedding anniversary. It's your 63rd birthday each. I'll make each of you one wish of your choice. The wife said, Mr. Genie, I'd like a diamond ring as big as a World Cup soccer ball. The genie said, no worries. Your wish is my command. And poof, she had a rock on her finger as big as the Hope Diamond. The husband, his eyes were big as hubcaps on a BMW. He couldn't believe it. His heart is racing. His faith is rising. And the genie said, sir, what can I do for you? And with a gleam in his eye and effective communication, he said to the genie, I want a wife 30 years younger than me. The genie said, no worries, mate. And poof, the man was 93. Not what he meant. So I'll try to say what I mean tonight. I want to speak to you from an album called Dare to Make a Difference. Nobody's picked to be on a team and then wants to sit on a bench. Nobody gives a gift to somebody else and then hopes it's never opened. Nobody devotes years of service to a company or ministry and then plans that when they retire, no one will notice. Nobody dreams of dying and having an unattended funeral. All of us want to make a difference. Nobody wants at a memorial service for somebody to stand up and say about their life, well, he worked hard to be successful. He did a good job of acquiring power and money. He was anxious and driven and self-preoccupied and polite and respectable. No. We want to leave the world a little changed. And when it's time to go, we want someone to say, my life is a little richer, my world is a little bigger, my faith is a little stronger, I'm a better person because this human being walked on the planet for a while. He or she made a difference in my life. We don't want to be space takers, we want to be difference makers. And God made you to want your life to count. It can get junked up by sin and ego, but you were created by God to make a difference on this earth. Matthew 5, verse 13. Jesus is talking one day to his disciples, and he said, you are the salt of the earth. Now, to understand what Jesus meant by this, you have to understand the role that salt played in Jesus' day. And it had a much more central role when he spoke that than it does today. Guess what the number one use of salt in the United States is today? More than 51% of all salt produced is used to de-ice roads. Now, that was not true in Jesus' day. When he came to earth, he didn't come to a place where roads were covered with ice and snow, because he knew it was not God's will for people to live in stupid places like that. Only 8% of all salt produced in America is used as table salt. I've been in northern European countries where they avoid salt because it might give their food flavor. But in the ancient world, it was a different story. People discovered that there was something about salt that was a preservative, kept decay and corruption from setting in. It was almost magic. They found that if they used it, they could preserve food in times of famine that would literally contribute to the outcome of life or death. They discovered it was a purifying agent because it destroyed bacteria. They discovered it brought delight to people who were eating because there are special taste buds God gave you on your tongue designed to respond to salt. So salt became highly prized. Most of the ancient cities in Italy, including Rome, were founded on salt works. Romans used it to pay their soldiers. Some of you may know that the Latin word for salt is the word sal, S-A-L. That's where we get our word salary from, because salt was used to pay wages to soldiers. And that's where we get the old expression, he or she is worth their salt. In the book, Salt, A World History, actually on the New York Times bestseller, author Mark Kurlansky writes, in the ancient world, salt was one of the most common factors that provoked and financed war. People went to war over salt. In fact, that's why we say when one country is attacked, it's been assaulted. I just made that up. So you can't understand what Jesus is saying unless you understand that in the ancient world, salt was highly prized. Plato said salt was dear to the gods. Homer wrote that it was a divine substance. It was prized stuff. It was currency. Countries went to war over it. Empires were built around it. And Jesus, when he's talking to an undistinguished group, a motley crew called his disciples, he said God's plan to protect the world from decay and corruption and to purify it and bring whatever flavor and delight and zeal it's going to have is you. You are the salt of the earth. You. That's what Jesus says. Now that's staggering news to most of us and hard to believe. We are the salt of the earth. But there's some sobering implications to that as well. Like salt does not exist for its own sake. When was the last time you went to someone's home for a meal and said to them, "This is great salt. Honey, why don't we have salt like this at home?" "Well, we got to switch brands." No. Salt doesn't call attention to itself. Now, I used to think all salt was the same. It's not true. There's gourmet salt, rock salt, sea salt, special kinds of salt. But in Jesus' day, salt was just salt. It didn't call attention to itself. Nobody gets hungry and says, "I think I'll go home and have a bowl of salt." No, and listen carefully. Salt's calling is to lose itself in something more glorious than itself, and only then does it fulfill its destiny. But if you're salt, you got to get out of the packet, and if you do, one difference maker in Jesus Christ can change the world. One of my favorite authors on grace is author Phil Yancey. And one of his books, he writes about a man named Ernest Gordon, a British Army officer captured by the Japanese in World War II. He was put in a labor camp and was forced to build a railroad through the jungles in Thailand under unbelievable conditions. Maybe you've heard of the Hollywood version, Bridge Over the River Kwai. The prisoners had to work in 120-degree heat. Their bodies were stung by insects, ravaged by disease and dysentery. Their feet were badly cut by stones. If a prisoner appeared to be slacking off, a guard would beat him to death or decapitate him in view of the other prisoners. Otherwise, they'd be worked until they were too sick to go on. then placed in a shack called the death house, where they had lay down and roast until they died. 80,000 men died trying to build this railroad. 393 corpses for every mile of track. The prisoners who survived lived like animals. The strong beat the weak for a few grains of rice, and the only thing that kept them alive was hate. It was a culture of death. Until one day, one man changed that. A work detail had finished for the day when one of the guards shouted his shovel was missing and demanded to know who had stolen it. Nobody confessed. So the guard screamed that everybody on the work crew was going to die. So he aimed his rifle at the first guy in the line and was going to kill the whole work crew. At that point, one of the enlisted men stepped forward and said, "I stole it." So the guard started to beat and kick him while he kept standing at attention. One of them smashed the butt of his rifle into his skull. He collapsed and died as they continued beating his corpse. That evening, when the tools were inventoried again, the work crew discovered they had made a mistake. No shovel was missing. No one had stolen anything. And that night, one of the prisoners remembered a verse from the Bible, John 15, verse 13. "Greater love has no man than this, than a man lay down his life for his friends." And something happened in the camp. Yancey writes, prisoners started to treat the dying with respect, started giving them funerals. They started marking the graves with a cross. And people who were strong began to give their food to those who were weak. Ernest Gordon himself had been paralyzed with fever. He had been laid out to die in the death house. He had written his final letter to his parents and was waiting to die. Then some men came in, carried him out. Prisoners gave him their food, massaged his leg muscles, cleaned his latrine. He said he hadn't thought much about God for a long time, but now he did. So they formed a little church in this camp where the people were dying by thousands. They formed a little church, and Ernest Gordon became the unofficial pastor. They planted a garden to grow medicinal plants to help people who were sick. They formed what they called the Jungle University, started teaching courses in history, philosophy, and science in 9 languages. They created an alternative culture in the culture of death, and Jesus had a name for that culture, the kingdom of God. In the middle of a culture of death, they created an alternative culture. It crops up in the most unlikely places, this kingdom of God. These prisoners became so transformed that when the Allied armies finally arrived to liberate them, instead of taking revenge on the guards, they treated the guards with mercy and forgiveness. Gordon's own life was turned upside down, and Yancey writes, much to his surprise, he ended up becoming a minister, a Presbyterian minister. And to think all of that started with a single difference maker. One man, and then it started to spread. Never underestimate the power of a difference maker, because one difference maker can change the world. And Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth. You're it." Edwin Everett Hale writes, "I am only one, but still I'm one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something I can do." You are the salt of the earth. Salt adds flavor, doesn't it? Unfortunately today, many Christians are vanilla, beige, odorless, tasteless, and colorless, uninteresting and boring. They lack boldness, they lack zeal and passion and energy and humor. Your presence should keep things from going stale or rotten. It should promote hope and faith and expectation in the midst of rampant despair and negativity. You are the salt of the earth, Jesus said. It's a life that demonstrates what life could be if it's lived effectively. Salt in proper doses creates thirst. And the thirst is the easiest environment to minister in. But in the absence of thirst, you're simply trying in vain to get people to go somewhere they don't want to go. Now, we're here just to hold services. We're not here just to run programs. We're not here to meet in little classes that feel safe and comfortable and warm and fuzzy. Salt doesn't exist for its own sake. It doesn't exist for its sake. We're here to permeate a dying world in the way salt permeates food. By conservative estimates, more than a quarter of the population of the United States claims to have had an evangelical conversion experience with Jesus Christ. Author Jeffrey Iverson writes, "A pound of meat surely would be affected by a quarter pound of salt. If this is real Christianity, the salt of the earth, where's the effect of which Jesus spoke?" Did you know that in our Western culture, it's almost harder to be salt here than in a prison camp? Because our culture is so seductive. A survey of things that are important among Christians was taken, and let me show you the culture we're up against. Live in good health, have a long life, be slim, physically fit and toned, have great hair, makeup, and body shape. Be intelligent, articulate, and computer savvy. Get into a good school. Be popular, sexually desirable without being promiscuous. Marry a Christian who has all of these criteria. Have a beautiful home with walls painted this year's cool colors. Clean, well decorated, and organized. Gourmet, fat meals or low carb, high protein. Baby food made from scratch. Kids, cute, healthy, smart, well-behaved. Get in the right school. Escape all danger of peer culture, but still be well-liked and popular. Be wise and respected. Have a quiet time. Be a prayer warrior, a Bible student. Rich without being snotty. Confident but not abrasive. Humble, spiritual. Raise your children in the faith. Don't damage them psychologically. Be relaxed, friendly, and easygoing. Come to Bible study. Write letters. Remember birthdays and anniversaries. Send gifts. Keep in touch with old friends. Folks, this is madness and insane, and we become enslaved seductively to this culture. And then the danger is to become enslaved by the culture and then add church on top of it. And Jesus said, no. God didn't intend people to live their lives in that kind of slavery or bondage. You are the salt of the earth. Don't get sucked into that. Now, Jesus is not giving a command here. He doesn't say, try to be salty. Work hard to get salty. He's making an observation. You are the salt of the earth. Now, we don't make the salt. And any time that somebody becomes so immersed in Jesus and His presence and His love and His goodness, anytime somebody becomes so immersed in Jesus Christ, they start to get liberated from the threats or rewards that keep them enslaved to their culture. They start to get free. And when people start to get free, they get salty. You are the salt of the earth. Then Jesus goes on in verse 13 of Matthew 5. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its saltiness, how could it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled on by men. Now, shucks, why Jesus have to go and say that? I mean, we was having a good time up to now. Ever see those verses on the refrigerator? I don't think so. People will sometimes say, well, Rick, isn't there a secret meaning to that in the Greek and the Hebrew so that it doesn't mean what it seems to say? Nope. So if our culture can't seduce you to bow down to it, if it can't keep you away from God and His people, then it will try to turn church into something else. I mean, like, here's what it'll do. It'll seduce you to serve it rather than God. It will try to seduce you to spend your life being too busy, too driven, too preoccupied with career, money, fame, status, and it will seduce you into making church a kind of stress management tool. Like you see on a bottle of pain reliever, or here's one you probably have in your country, Solar Cane for a sunburn. If you read on that bottle tonight in your medicine cabinet, it says, quote, take for fast, soothing, temporary relief from pain. Fast, soothing, temporary relief from pain. So if our culture can't seduce you to bow down to it, if it can't keep you away from God and His people, then it will try to turn church and a relationship with Christ into fast, soothing, temporary relief from pain. And when you leave church, you're still enslaved to all the things everybody else in this crazy culture is enslaved to. But Jesus said, no, that's not the plan. You are the salt of the earth. So people will come to church year after year, stay on the same crazy treadmill, overworked, overcommitted, overextended financially, still praying about the same stuff they were praying about 10 years ago. And the real reason, if people are honest, is they never made the decision they're going to die to the culture. So their prayers tend to be on this line: God, relieve me of all the stress and pain and pressure I'm under, but keep me chasing after all the stuff everybody else is chasing after. Just give me some fast, soothing, temporary relief from pain. I don't want to change. Just give me some fast, soothing, temporary relief from pain. And I wonder if there's anybody here tonight who needs to say, Jesus, with your help, I'll die to this culture and be fully sold out to you. Now, the good news is that when somebody in God's community gets salty, it gets contagious. And when you become a difference maker because it's really Jesus at work, it gets contagious. And you never know what God's going to do when just one person says, I want to be a difference maker. Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. You're it. You are God's plan to fight the decay and corruption in this sorry, dark, broken world and to make it winsome and attractive. You're it. And Jesus is looking for somebody who will say, I'll die to this culture by the grace and help of God. I won't live in slavery to its values and spend my lifetime and energy and resources serving it, and then use the church as an occasional temporary stress management pain reliever. I will live as the salt of the earth, Lord, and I will allow you to flow through me into my culture. Now, one of the amazing things about the early church, the salt of the earth, is that the people who were opposed to it thought they could stop it by persecuting it. They sent the leaders to prison. Then the prisons got salty. Then the persecutors say, well, shucks, that didn't work. We'll kick everybody out of Jerusalem. And guess what happened? All Asia Minor got salty. Everywhere. They thought you could stop the church by spreading Christians around. But that was just getting the salt out of the shaker. You're the salt of the earth. It doesn't matter how old or young you are. It doesn't matter what your title is or whether you even have one. You are the salt of the earth. Do you have any idea what Jesus Christ could do with a bunch of fanatical people from church who say, okay, God, my number one priority of my life between now and my last day on planet Earth is to be a difference maker for you. Everything I've got, my time, my talent, my treasure, whether it's big or small, whatever I've got, it's yours. I'm not going to play the game. I'm not going to stay on this treadmill. Do you have any idea? I will lay down everything because I serve the biggest difference maker who ever lived. And as a matter of human history, Jesus Christ made a difference and an impact on the world that no one else ever has. He said, I'll pour my life out. And then he started the church, and it's still spreading. Let me mention quickly a difference maker by the name of Nehemiah. He had a massive construction project. He served the king of Persia, now Iran. And one day he gets word that his homeland, Jerusalem, is in total ruins and the walls broken down. The people who are living there are in fear. They have no vision, no purpose, no sense of calling. So Nehemiah sits down after hearing all this and cries like a baby. Now, not because he's emotionally fragile. I mean, his job is cupbearer to the king of Persia. He got to taste the food and drink the wine before the king gets it to see if the enemies of the king have poisoned it. And if Nehemiah dies, then the king gets a word of knowledge. Don't eat the food. Duh. Nehemiah's wife never had to ask her husband when he came home from the palace, "Sweetheart, did you have a good day?" If the sucker came home at all, he had a good day. Kings always had a lot of enemies. Some of you think you have a high-stress job. But God gives Nehemiah a vision. What if we rebuild the wall? If we rebuild the wall, we can rebuild the city. If we rebuild the city, we can restore our community. If God can restore our community, we can fulfill our destiny. If we can fulfill our destiny, then the world can be changed. Great story. Not an easy task. They face enormous opposition. Not mission difficult, mission impossible. But here's the secret. Everybody in the community played a part. And like Nehemiah, you're on a construction project here at Hillsong, and from your churches, in your state, in your nation, wherever you're from. You're building a wall, and that wall is not concrete, it's changed lives. Every time a marriage is put back together, every time a child finds out God loves him, every time somebody goes through divorce recovery and discovers grace and mercy, when a neighbor you thought would never darken the door of a church becomes a follower of Christ, you're building a wall here. And that takes a lot of bricklayers. Folks, we got walls to build at home, in our cities, and in our nation. There are searching people who need somebody to introduce them to Christ. There are spiritual infants who need someone to help them grow up. There are lonely people who need somebody to shepherd a small cell group where they can find a friend. There are children coming every week, thousands, from broken homes who need somebody to show God's love for them. And there are adolescents with hormones exploding all over their bodies who need an adult to love and care for them. And the biggest lie around emerging, growing churches, whether it's called mega church or you just have a church that's becoming fruitful and productive in a growing large church, it is people who will come and sit out there and say this to themselves: I'm not needed here. There are lots of talented people around here. My serving is not really needed here. There are lots of financial resources here. My giving isn't really needed here. Not needed. Give me a massive break. Are you kidding me? Folks, we have a wall to build. We have a world to change. So grab a brick, dude. And by the way, do you know what the only man-made object on Earth that's visible from the space shuttle by astronauts is? Well, it's the Great Wall of China. While you're building the Great Wall of Hillsong Church, we're building the Great Wall in San Antonio. Others are here from North Carolina, from Paris and from London, and God knows Walla Walla and every other place I can't pronounce. We're building a great wall, one brick at a time, one Christ-following, Spirit-empowered, yes-saying person at a time, to salt our city and our nation and our world. A wall builder, a difference maker. God is a wise master builder. And God builds, listen, generationally. So what will we leave to the next generation? In my country, my generation has spent the unearned incomes of my children and grandchildren. And when my generation dies, all it's going to pass out to my children and to those of my constituents is trillions of dollars of debt. The Bible says a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So the real test of your effectiveness or ministry or church or life or marriage, does anything survive past you to bless the second and third generation? Paul said, if any man's work endures, he will receive a reward. Now you can explode overnight. You can make the cover of Christianity Today or Charisma magazine. You can go on TV. You can be a featured speaker at conferences. You can sell tapes and albums. But the real test, will it stand up to generational testing? Think of all the ministries that didn't last one generation. So it's possible in my country to make money and make noise, but make no difference. May God help us build spiritual capital in our churches so that when we're gone, we can pass that inheritance on to our spiritual sons and daughters. You are the salt of this earth. Now here's what I want you to do. When you came in, I hope they gave you a package of salt. On the way out, you're going to get a package of salt. Now this is not a charismatic form of service. It's just for tonight. And I want you to take this little packet of salt. And by the way, I want to thank Sidney McDonald Corporation for giving us 20,000 packs free. God bless McDonald's. At least they're making a difference. And I want you to take that little packet of salt and put it in your purse or put it in your pocket. Someplace you'll see it for the next, say, 2 days. And every time you see it, say to yourself, I am the salt of the earth. With all my flaws and all my fallenness, that's exactly what you and I are. You are the salt of the earth. And then sometime this week, break it open and pour the salt out. Pour it on your French fries, pour it on your salad, your eggs, or just pour it out in the air. And as you pour it out, just pray a little prayer. Lord, pour my life out. Pour my life out wherever you want me to go. It doesn't matter. I'll go wherever you want me to go. You, Jesus said, are the salt of the earth. I want you to bow your head with me and listen carefully. Would you may be here tonight visiting. You may be an observer. And you may enjoy yourself. But you have never given yourself to the one who poured his life out for you. Would you be willing to give that life unconditionally, unreservedly to Jesus Christ? And say, Lord, I'm a bit scared or timid. I'm a bit uncertain, but I trust you. I want to give you, the Creator, my life. I want you to forgive me and cleanse me and save me and do a work of new creation in my heart. Make me a new creature. Give me a new beginning, a fresh start tonight. And pour me out into this world where you've chosen to use me. Whatever I have, little or much, pour me out. I want to make a difference. And if God's speaking to you about a call, say yes. God has big plans for you. God has big plans for His church. God has big plans for this world. You and me, with all of our hang-ups and flaws, we're it, the salt of this earth. And in just a moment, you can make that commitment to say, Jesus, I've been holding back, been saving my life, but I'm willing to let it go, give it to you, and trust you to pour me out wherever you want me to go. I remember where I was and when I was at 44 years of age, laying on a couch in Savannah, Georgia, comfortable, low interest rate mortgage, no worries, and then God messed with me. And it was very uncomfortable. And I wrestled and fought for quite a while. But then I finally said, okay, pour me out wherever you want. I have no regrets to this day, and I'm so grateful. And I think about a teenage couple meeting on a beach in New Zealand and probably having no clue one day they would be speaking to thousands and thousands of people and affecting a few million around the world just because they said, Lord, pour our life out. I want to make a difference. Don't worry about how big the difference is. Shucks. I just don't want to leave this earth without leaving a footprint on it. I just want to know somebody's better. Somebody's life is better because I was in the world, that I helped somebody, that what I was given, this incredible, precious thing called life, and the privilege to live reasonably free, and the privilege to be reasonably healthy and normal. I don't want to abuse that and waste it. I want to know I did all I could for the sake of Jesus, who poured himself out for me, to say, okay, Lord, I'm on the team. I'm a player, not a poser. Pour me out. I'll play my part to make some difference. Every head bowed, every eye closed.